Okay. Thank you, Natan. Okay, so I will begin. Hi, everyone, out there in the metaverse. Um, my name is Joshua Joseph Freundel. Those who know me know I go by Jojo. In Hebrew, it is Yosef. And I am an Eretz alumnus of I was at Eretz Tzvi in the years 57, 68, 57, 69. I was a Shana Bet student. I was there from 2007 to 2009. And I am very happy um, to be speaking and honored that Rav Berman, who I believe is taking some well-deserved rest right now from his continued efforts at fundraising and putting together this Torahthon for the yeshiva. So at his request, I'm honored to be speaking, to be sharing some words of Torah with you all this evening or morning or maybe afternoon, depending on where you are. Uh, Eretz Tzvi has been a very important place to me. Um, it is a place as Rav Ebner mentioned in one of his famous sichot, I think towards the beginning of my first year there, that the time spent in yeshiva, he compared it to the way Maimonides describes prophecy in the Moreh Nevuchim, and particularly the insight that it's sort of when you reach that moment, it becomes like a flash of light, and the whole world is illuminated. And some people have that for a moment, and some people have that for an enduring period of time. And he describes that only Moshe Rabbeinu had it for his entire life. But Ravender described the experience in yeshiva to something like that, that you get to spend an entire year immersed in Torah, immersed in this study, and that as he said it, there is for most people never another opportunity like that to be so immersed in Torah that everything is at your fingertips, everything just makes sense. And that really was the experience that I had at Eretz Tzvi. You know, it's been 15 years since I was there, and I still have these two binders full of notes, full of documents that I have full plans to digitize and add to my hard drive someday. But I took the opportunity, I want to take the opportunity to try and learn as much as possible. And that was really one of the things that Eretz Tzvi did and continues to do extremely well, is that they are not a monovocal yeshiva. Yeshiva speaks and has multiple voices and multiple subjects, and they allow you to find different things and different interests that you have, and to paraphrase a famous saying, "Hafach ba v'fach ba kekula ba," that you turn everything over in Torah because everything is in there. In the mind of the Rebbeim and Eretz Tzvi, you turn over everything in the world because Torah is there, because Torah applies to everything as well. So to begin sharing some Torah, the subject that I chose to share on is something that ties into my interests now as a lawyer as well, and a student of general law, which is God as a juridical person. So what does that mean? So to start, I will actually point to a different story of Rav Ebner's, that in a different sicha he mentioned the story, a short story written by the Yiddish author Chaim Grada called "My Quarrel with Hirsch Raciner." And after telling the story, and again in the nature of how the yeshiva works, he had a copy of it, and he took the copy and he put it on the bima in the center of the Beit Midrash, and it had a little note written on it in, I believe, Mrs. Ebner's handwriting that said, "Return to Rav Ebner's desk." And I know that because I still have the copy of it, and I'll just show you right here. I did not steal it. I was a good yeshiva boy. I wasn't about to take my learning with stealing. But what I did do was sneak into the office at some point when folks were away and make a photocopy of it. And kept it, and that's been in my records ever since. And I've returned to it a few times. And what the story does is it tells Chaim Grada in as a narrator in a sort of memorized, fictionalized version, his conversation with a fellow member of his yeshiva. He had gone to Nvaraduk for a number of years, and he talks about these run-ins they had both before and after the Holocaust. And at certain points, he essentially describes, he puts God on trial. How could a God who existed have done this? A sort of traditional foray into theodicy, into the question of how God can allow evil to happen. There's another book by a perhaps more well-known author of Holocaust literature, Elie Wiesel, and that book is called The Trial of God. More lengthily, it is The Trial of God as it was held on February 25th, 1649 in Shamgorod, in which Elie Wiesel recounts, again, in a fictionalized version of a scene that he actually saw in the concentration camps. A scene of three men getting together and organizing a beis din, a rabbinical court, to put God on trial for the massacres, the deaths en masse of the Jewish people that he had allowed to happen. And the question that I had, and that I would like to just sort of point to a couple of sources in the time that I have now, is not in a theological sense, but in a legal sense. Is that something that halacha can conceive of? Can God be on trial? Can God be sued? Does God have sort of the same rights and responsibilities that any other conceivable legal individual would have? And it's a very sort of odd question to ask, and I think for most people it comes as a bit of a jarring and almost impossible question until you think of it even in the context of modern law. The most famous case in the history of United States law, the law of the U.S., is a case called Brown v. Board of Education. And Brown was a person, and the Board of Education was an organization. It was a group that was comprised of individuals who sat on its board, but it itself was not a physical entity. It was some sort of incorporeal being that still was recognized within the law as containing rights and responsibilities and the ability to therefore, for example, be sued and have to respond. That's what a juridical person is. And to put it that way, I think it becomes much clearer what the question is. Do we see, or does halacha see, God in similar idea, in similar terms as that? I promise you this isn't heresy. Everything I point to is coming from the Gemara, from Talmudic literature. But what is very interesting is that the Talmud does possess, there are many people who state, Rav Lichtenstein has a famous essay on it, the idea that the philosophy, the sort of pure philosophy of the Gemara, is very difficult to discern and doesn't really exist in a consistent way, because there isn't a philosophy in the way that the Greeks had it. It's discursive, it jumps from topic to topic, there are many different opinions, but within the legal sphere, it does emerge that the rabbis of the Talmud had a very rich legal metaphysics, that they understood legal concepts and legal processes that existed within the halacha in a way that encompassed, and I'm going to point to a few sources now, suggest that even included God within that legal superstructure. So I want to mention now a few sources for this. So the first source is actually a fairly remarkable source that comes from the Yerushalmi, from Talmud Yerushalmi in Masachet Rosh Hashanah. And the Gemara goes as follows. I'm just going to read for everyone, and I will translate. Amar Rabbi Lazar, para beseleos onomos agripos. A king, it's a Greek phrase, but it essentially amounts to what follows. Benoheg shebe'olam melech basar v'adam gozer gzeira. In the way of the world, a king of flesh and blood will make a decree. Ratzah mekaima. If he wants, he will fulfill the decree. Ratzah acherim mekaimin. Osa. But if he wants, only others will fulfill the decree, and he is not required to. Aval, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Eino Chein Ela Gozer Gzera Unkaima Tchila. But God is not like that. Rather, when he makes a decree, he fulfills it first. Matam, what's the reason? And then we quote a pasuk, as the Gemaras want to do. V'shamru es mishmarti ani Hashem. And they shall keep my charge, I am God. Anihu sheshimarti mitzvaseha shel Torah tchila. I am the one who keeps the Torah's mitzvot first. And then there's an ending just to show an actual example of this. Amar Rabbi Simon. Rabbi Simon says, Kasuv mipnei seva takum ve'adarta b'nei sakein yaresa me'elohecha ni Hashem. You should rise before the aged, and you should defer to an elder, and you shall fear your God. I am God. I'm the Lord. Ani hu shekiyamti amidas sakein tchila. I am he who first fulfilled this standing before an elder, a reference to the beginning of Parshas Vayera, in which God is pictured, kamuvan, as standing before Abraham when he is recovering from the bris, and then the angels or the men come by, and Abraham sees them and goes to greet them. So God stands in front of an elder first. God is bound. But it's a rather remarkable statement that the Yerushalmi makes here, because what it exclaims, in essence, is that God is bound by his own laws, by his own mitzvot that he has given to people. It makes a bit of a statement on political theory as well, right? That a normal sovereign is not bound or need not be bound, but that God has sort of chosen to be bound. But it's not. It's a comprehensive binding. It is not just that God must follow the law, but that in a sense God is bound by the legal processes that exist within the legal system known as halacha, and that's really a remarkable statement. I mean, there are certain mitzvahs I think anyone can come up with that it would be very difficult to imagine just how God completes them. There's an entire discourse in some literature, for example, on how does God do teshuvah. If God is ineffable, if God is never wrong, how does God do teshuvah? I will also note that there are certain rabbis and strains of thought, particularly in the Maimonidean strain, that essentially don't hold this as, so to speak, halach l'maaseh. God is bound by the law in some sort of up there metaphysical sense, but it's not really that, because there's no way to conceive of God as being bound that way. But for the Gemara and for the rest of Talmudic literature, there are places, and it does seem to be the case, that God functions in many ways as another legally recognized entity, essentially as the term, a juridical person who is subject to rights and responsibilities and things like that. So to see this in action, we'll turn to another source. This source comes from Midrash, from Shmos Rabbah. And it is an interpretation of a passage that is well known to I think anyone who attended yeshiva, anyone who regularly goes to pray on to Shacharis on weekday mornings, because it is the Torah reading that we do on fast days. So the Midrash says as follows: Davar acher, another thing. Vayechal Moshe, and Moshe implored. Again, if you've ever read it, laned it, as I have, you can hear the trup going off in your head. Mahu chein, right? First two words of that section. Mahu chein. What is it? What does it mean that Moshe implored? Amar Rabbi Berechia b'shem Rabbi Chelbo b'shem Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Berechia said in the name of Rabbi Chelbo, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak, shehitir nidro shel yotro, that Moshe nullified the vow of the creator, of his creator. Ketzad, how does that work? Ella b'shah she'asu Yisrael ha'egel amad Moshe mefayis Elokim she'im cholahem. At the time when Israel made the calf, the Egel Zahav, Moshe stood to appease God so that he would forgive them. Amar Elokim, Moshe kvar nishpati zoveach le'elohim yacharam. Udvar shavua sheyatza mipi eno machziro. God said, Moshe, there's nothing I can do. I already swore in a previous pasuk in Shmos that one who sacrifices to a false god shall be cut off, shall be excommunicated, and the words of an oath that come from my mouth, right, that God says cannot be reversed, cannot be taken back. Amar Moshe says to God, Ribon ha'olam, right, master of the world, V'lo nasata li hafara shel nadarim, did you not give me the power to annul vows? V'amarta ish ki yidor neder l'Hashem, o yishavashu al esor yisar al nafsho, lo yachal dvaro. As it says in a different pasuk, one who makes a vow to God or swears an oath, placing an obligation on himself, shall not break his pledge. Hu eno mochel, aval chacham mochel es nidro be'es sheishal alav. Right? He cannot break his oath, but someone else, a wise person, could break the oath at a time when he's requested to. B'chol zaken shemore hora im yirtzeh shikablu cherim hora so tzarichu l'kaima tchila. And then the law is excuse me, and every zaken and every elder, if he wants to give instruction, and if he desires that others should accept his teachings, he must uphold them first. In other words, the very sentence that the Yerushalmi mentions, that God will make a decree and then follow it first, Moshe now says, you said that this could be done, that you could annul vow, and anyone who wishes to do anything would do that thing first. So you, God, therefore, can annul your vow through me. And then it ends, you commanded on Hafaras Nadarim, on the annulment of vows, so the law is that you yourself can annul the vow the way that you told everyone else. So immediately God and Moshe were wrapped in God's talis, so to speak, and sat like an elder, and God annulled his vow, and that's why it says Vayishev Bahar, and that's why Moshe in the recounting in Devarim, he says, and I sat on the mountain. So again, to reiterate, what we have here is a statement where God essentially says, I cannot do this. I am bound by something almost metaphysical, that the law of God is if God says something, it will come to pass. And Moshe says, no, but you are actually bound by the law that you have created. And the law that you have created allows for this process whereby you can annul oaths. So God himself is bound up in this same way. All right. Turning from there to a different topic, or a different piece of this. So God is bound, and we see it again. I'm providing one source, but we see it in a number of different sources. This idea that legally God is subject to and bound by these certain processes that exist. Another piece that the Gemara is aware of is the idea that, therefore, that God can bear certain responsibilities, certain requirements, in the same way that anyone else can, obligations essentially under law. And here we actually have some sources where God himself, as it were, acknowledges and admits to such responsibilities. What I have not found are places where the Gemara would say, you would necessarily have a rabbi claiming the type of thing, that God is somehow guilty or liable or responsible, although that does exist in some of the later Hasidic literature, in which in which you have some of these rebbeim, after going through some of the worst times in our history, actually calling out to God in the same way as Elie Wiesel's book, and describing certain liability of God. But here's an example where God himself says it. In the Gemara in Bava Kama, Yasiv Ravami v'Rav Asi Kame de Rav Yitzchak Nachal. So Ravami and Ravasi were sitting before Rav Yitzchak Napacha. Mar Amarle Lema Mar Shmatata, Umar Amarle Lema Mar Agadata. So one of them said to him, "Let the master say a halacha," and the other said to him, "Let the master say a gada." This, I think, is also a familiar question that sometimes comes up for young adults as they go off to yeshiva, young men as they go off to yeshiva, about how much to emphasize the halacha. How much are we sitting and learning Talmud all day, and how much are we learning the Agadata, the sort of wide scope, wide sweep of the rest of Jewish thought and Jewish history. And again, I'll add, one of the things I loved about Eretz Tzvi was the way that they meld the two, and the way that they don't stop at halacha, that they combine the two, that they give a broad picture of Agadata as well, and of the richness of Jewish thought, of Frumkeit more broadly. But we have in this Gemara, one really wants halacha, one really wants Agadata. Pasach lememar Agadata v'lo shavik mar. So he started to say in Agada, and the one who wanted the halacha didn't let him continue. Pasach lememar shmatata. He started to say a halacha v'lo shavik mar, and the other one said, "You're not allowed." Amar lehem. So he said to them, "Emshol lachem mashal lama hadavar domeh." So I'll give you a mashal about what's happening right now. What is this like? The Adam sheyesh lo shtei nashim, echas yalda v'echas kena. It's like a man who had two wives. One was younger and one was older. Yalda melaketes lo levanos, zekena melaketes lo shchoros. So the young wife wants him to look younger, so she starts pulling out the white hairs on his head, and the older one wants him to look older, so she starts pulling out the black hairs on his head. Nimtza kerach mikan mikan. So it finds out at the end that he is bald from here and from there, because one insisted on one insisted on the other. It ends up that he's lost everything. He has nothing left. But then he decides and figures out a way that he's going to resolve this. And again, this is where we have God acknowledging a certain liability, a certain responsibility, but also, interestingly, something else about this is this combination of Agadata and halacha, the idea that there is a certain metaphysics here, but that it is grounded in law, it is grounded in the halacha, I think is very interesting. So what does he say? Amar lehen, I hachi ema lechu milta deshave l'tavrachet. So therefore, let me tell you something that is appropriate for both of you. In other words, it has halacha and agada. So it quotes a pasuk, ki seitzei eish umsa'a kotzim teitzei me'atzma shalem yishalem hamavir es habeira. So if a fire breaks out and catches on thorns by itself, is implied in the verse, shalem yishalem hamavir. Then the one who kindled the fire is the one who should repay. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So what does it mean? How can you have someone who kindled fire for himself? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God says, Ali l'shalem es ha'be'era shehivarti. It is on me to pay a sort of restitution for the fire that I kindled. What is the fire that kindled? Of course, it is the fire that consumed, that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. So God here, in this sort of halachic allegory, is acknowledging a certain sense of responsibility. The fact that there can be a legal liability that somehow adheres and attaches to God is further proof that God, in the concept of the sort of halachic metaphysics, is a juridical person, is this type of entity that is acknowledged and can be seen. I'll point to just one more as we're coming to the end of this 30 minutes. And that is the idea, on the other hand, and this is really nowadays where we get into halacha l'maaseh. What is the way that the halacha affects us nowadays, and how would this concept really sort of manifest? And that's the idea of the opposite of God is a rights holder. Can God own property? Can God, again, in however the concept we have of him, it, the being is, can God right, can God claim rights that are related to the ownership of property? The right to exclude, the right to transfer the property, the right to acquire property, that sort of thing. And again, the answer is the Gemara seems very clear to say that God can. So halacha maseh, the clearest place of this has to do with brachos. What is the reason that we say a bracha? The Gemara in Masechtas Brachos tells us Tanu Rabbanan, right? And I will note again, it's a multivocality of the Gemara. This is one of several opinions, but it's an opinion that gives this point very clearly. Tanu Rabbanan, Asar lo adam sheyaneh min haolam hazeh b'lo bracha. It is forbidden to derive benefit from this world without a bracha, without a blessing. And anyone who derives benefit from this world without a blessing, it is as if he misused a consecrated object. A consecrated object which itself is practically something that has essentially been set aside, been given to God for the use in the temple, in the ritual worship, and therefore cannot be used for ordinary purposes. And so if you take anything without a bracha, it's almost as though you've essentially misused hekdesh, what's called hekdesh, right? Ma'ita kante. And what is this remedy? Yelech eitz al chacham. This is just a bit of a funny digression. Yelech al chacham. You should go to a chacham, a wise person. Yelech eitz al chacham. Ma'avidle. You should go to a wise person, but he already did what will the wise person do for him? Ha'avadle isura. He already violated the prohibition. He already did this me'ile benefit. Ela amar Rava, so rather Rava says, Yelech etzel chacham me'ikarav yondenu brachos kadei shelo yavo lidei me'ila. Essentially, what does Rava say? Something that, again, anyone who grew up going to a Jewish day school is familiar with. You should go have a bracha beat. When you're in the beginning, you should learn the brachos, and that way you won't make this mistake. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Kol haneneh min ha'olam hazeh b'lo bracha, ki'ilu neheneh mikodshei shamayim. Anyone who enjoys, who benefits from this world without a bracha, it's as though he benefited similarly, right, from the kodshei shamayim, from things that were consecrated to heaven. Shenemar l'Hashem ha'aretz u'molah, like it says in a pasuk in Tehillim, right? For God is the earth and everything within it, and all it contains. So everything is God's. Everything belongs to God. Rabbi Levi Rami, but Rabbi Levi has an issue or contradiction. Ksiv l'Hashem ha'aretz u'molah, so it's written everything, the land and everything in it is God's. Uksiv hashamayim shamayim l'Hashem ha'aretz nasan livnei adam. But it's also written that the heaven is for God and the world he gave to man. So the earth, the haaretz, is not God's. It's actually ours. It's actually humanity's. So can't we make use of it? Lo kashya, the Gemara answers, it's not a problem here. Kan kodem bracha, kan la'achar bracha. This one is beforehand, and this one is after. And then the Gemara finishes with another comparison, another parable about what happens. Amar Achanina bar Papa, kol haneneh min ha'olam hazeh b'lo bracha, ki'ilu gozel l'hakadosh baruch hu knesset Yisrael. Anyone who enjoys without bracha, it is though he has stolen from God and from the sort of people of Israel, the community of Israel, something like that. Shedemar gozel aviv imo vomer ein pesha chaver hu ish mashris ve'ein aviv el hakadosh baruch hu. There's no father except for God. Shedemar halo avicha kanecha ve'ein imo el knesset Yisrael. And there's no imo, there's no mother like other than the community of Israel. So the idea of brachos, something that we do every single day, or that we encounter every single day, is tied in intimately to this idea of God as a juridical person, as an entity that is recognized by law as containing rights and responsibilities. Things belong to God, and how do we transfer them? How do we sort of gain possession of them? We do so through the institution and the action taken when we make a bracha. And through that, again, we sort of interact with God on a legal level every day in our everyday lives. And I think that's how I want to end, just in the last few seconds, is to say that one of the things that Eretz Tzvi did and does, I think, very well is to teach how to interact with God and how to interact with Judaism on an everyday level in incredibly profound ways, in ways that people may not notice at the time, but that 15 years out, I'm always appreciative of and constantly recognizing. And that's what Eretz Tzvi was to me. And I hope that, with everyone's help, that's what it can be for another generation of students. And thank you for joining me for this bit of Torah. And I'll turn it back over to Natan.